Hi from the conference house in Staten Island. I'm going to wait a couple minutes and see if anyone else joins us. I know it's an odd time, a Saturday afternoon at 1 o'clock, so maybe some of you will watch this later and learn all about what happened here on September 11th, 1776. So let me know that you're there. You can always say hi using the chat. I'm on the chat. And behind me is the conference house. I'll be showing you some better pictures of this as we go through our presentation today. Let me just move this over here so I can see what I'm going to show you. Hello, Mr. Garrett. It's nice to see you. Thanks for joining me today. Now, I fully intended originally to do this broadcast from the conference house in Staten Island today. I wanted to be out there live to talk about what occurred on this date, but due to circumstances beyond my control, meaning, you know what? I have to change the setting on my microphone. Hold on a second. I think this will make it sound better for you. Let me know if this didn't improve the sound. I think it should have. I forgot to change it last night for Mrs. Q. Anyway, I fully intended to be out there today to do this live, but our car is in the shop and I couldn't get out there. But I dug through a lot of my old prints and videos and found that I had a whole presentation that I could put together for you. So here we are at the conference house on Staten Island, and this is at the very southern tip of Staten Island. And I'm going to share a little bit of video with you while I talk you through where we are. So give me a moment. Sounds fine. Thank you. Hey, Miriam, nice to see you. So I want to share a video with you. Give me a moment. I just have to find the right spot for sharing this. Now, I hope that you should be seeing this video right about now. And this is the conference house in Staten Island. And this is at the very southern tip of Staten Island, facing out onto Raritan Bay, New Jersey, and the Atlantic Ocean. This little house was built in the year 1680 by a Captain Christopher Billop. Captain Billop was a captain in the Royal Navy, the British Navy, and also had amassed a bit of a fortune and built this beautiful stone house facing out onto Raritan Bay. It is built of something called Holland brick, which were very expensive imported bricks at that time. And we're going to be taking a look at the interior of the house as well. Now, this house was eventually inherited by his grandson, a Colonel Christopher Billop, also in the Royal Navy. And by the time 1776 rolls around, he is the owner of the house. Now, you might know in 1776, Staten Island was occupied by British forces. So this house would have been in that area occupied by the British, and turns out to be used for an incredible conference that occurred here on September 11th of 1776. Now, today, this is all part of the New York City Park Service. It's a huge park, which is 265 acres and comprises a number of different structures. But today we're only going to be talking here about the Billop House. And here's a little bit of video of us walking up to the door. So keep this in mind, what it looks like walking up to the door, because this is going to be a part of our story as I continue to tell it as we go along. So here's our view of the Billop House. Our video is just about ending here, and I'm going to go back to still photographs. So here I am, I'm back, and I'm just going to check over at your comments every now and then over there. So behind me is the Billop House. So when we enter the Billop House, as I said, it was built in 1680, and it is restored very nicely to what it looked like at the time. It is a National Historic Landmark, and it is a New York City landmark as well. Now, this gives us a look at a home in 1776 New York City that would have been considered a wealthy home. And I want you to keep this in mind, because if I can find it, I'm going to show you a picture of what a wealthy home outside of London would have looked like at that time. So this would have been a very wealthy family for the year 1776 in the colonies. And I'm just going to look to the side here. When we enter, and I'm not that good at this screen sharing, so bear with me as I find these pictures. I thought this would have gone back to the same place I was using before. And when we enter the house, one of the first rooms we see is this one, which I hope you're seeing. So you should be seeing this room now. And this is the room I think the conference took place in. And this room is as soon as you enter the house. And you can see it's quite nice. The doors are nice, lots of windows. Window panes were expensive. There are a lot of windows in this house. We have some very nicely locally crafted furniture with upholstered chairs. And another look at that room. Another look at that room here. You can see the fireplace and the table set. And I think I have a picture of that set table. So I hope you're seeing these pictures as I scroll through them. I'm not really sure if I'm doing this right. So someone tell me if I'm not. I'm not that good at this screen sharing stuff. I usually have a whole presentation plan, but this gives us a look at what the interior of the home would have looked like. And so we have the living room. And as we go upstairs, we find a couple of bedrooms, very nicely outfitted and furnished for the year 1776. So very nice home, indicating a wealthy family lived here. Now the Phillips were loyalists, so obviously it didn't bother them that they were occupied by the British in the summer of 1776. And on this day in 1776, a peace conference was held in this house, a very secretive oh, good. Thank you, Ms. McGann, for telling me you're seeing the photos as I scroll through them, because I have more to show. So thank you for letting me know. So this peace conference took place on September 11th. It was a very secretive peace conference. And the gentlemen who took part in it were, surprisingly, Lord Admiral Richard Howe, commander of the Royal Fleet, and 3 representatives of our Continental Congress. 3 names. While I hope you know all 3 names, I'm sure you'll know at least 2 of those names: Benjamin Franklin, John Adams, and Edward Rutledge, representing the whole geography of the colonies, right? So we have John Adams from New England, Benjamin Franklin from the Mid-Atlantic colonies, and Edward Rutledge representing the South and South Carolina. And as I was putting this together, I realized, there's a few interesting things about these 3 men from America. One is that Franklin was the oldest signer of the Declaration of Independence, and Rutledge was the youngest signer of the Declaration of Independence, and John Adams was probably the most outspoken signer of the Declaration of Independence. They are all 3 hardcore, we would call them patriots or rebels. So it's interesting that they chose probably 3 men who would have been the most intractable to attend this conference. And also, while I was preparing, I wanted to make a note for those of you who are fans of the musical 1776, as I am. I have to object to the portrayal of Edward Rutledge in that musical as a Southern dandy, a Southern loyalist dandy, which is far, far, far from the truth. Edward Rutledge came from a family of very radical men. His father, John Rutledge, was then what they called the president of South Carolina. So he was the rebel governor of South Carolina, the local leader. They called him the president. Came from a family of hardcore rebels, and he absolutely was not a dandy, as they show him in the musical. So that's one of my objections to the musical. But I love the musical, and I watch it every time it's on. So I encourage you to watch it as well. So one of the things I wanted to talk about today is, why don't we learn about this peace conference in school? I never learned there was a peace conference in America in the summer of 1776. You probably didn't learn as well. If you did, let me know in the comments, because I'll be really curious to know if you went to a school that taught this in any way. I didn't learn about this. So I started thinking about, what does knowledge of this peace conference really do to affect our understanding of the American Revolution and what was happening, and our nation's history. Now, I'm sure all of you know that a nation's history is an incredibly important thing to teach the people of that nation, right? So all of our countries have some sort of a founding story about our history. And probably, one of the most important that we learn about in school is the founding mythology of Rome, right? With the brothers Romulus and Remus, raised by a she-wolf, and one kills the other and becomes the founder of Rome. Now, we know that's not true, but this was a very strong mythology about the founding of Rome, the strength of Rome, and the capability of the people of Rome and the growth of the empire. So we can see the purpose that that mythology served in the minds of the people of Rome. So here, when I was growing up, and I'll tell you, I learned American history during the Cold War, as I bet some of you, maybe many of you did as well. So when we learn American history during the Cold War, of course, we're going to learn a very strong story of the history of the founding of America, one in which the rebels here are very self-sufficient, very strong, and where they're fighting against some sort of totalitarian oppression. And all of that is true. I'm not going to negate any of that. All of that is true. But if we learn that there was actually a peace conference in the summer of 1776, it might tell us something interesting about England, and that maybe England wasn't as hell-bent on war with the colonies as we learned, and wasn't so unbending in their view of us. So it gives us a little bit of a different view of our enemy at that time, England. And let me just check some comments here. Oh, Mr. Linden has some interesting comments over on Facebook. You can go take a look at those. So it tells us that maybe England wasn't as confident about fighting the colonies as we have learned. So who was here? The first person we're going to talk about today is Richard Howe, 1st Earl Howe, Lord Admiral of the Royal Navy. In 1776, he is 50 years old. He's a graduate of Eton College, so you know he's from the aristocracy. Of course, he's a title gentleman, the first Earl Howe. He comes from a wealthy family. All of the sons have served. His brother in 1776, his younger brother, General Richard Howe, Sir Howe, 3rd Viscount Howe, is commander of British forces in America in the war as well. So he's commander of the army. Their older brother, George Howe, the original 3rd Viscount Howe, was a colonel here during the French and Indian War, and fought in the Hudson Valley around Albany, and was very well liked of the people of that area. So they are a family of military commanders. Richard Howe now is the oldest of the two remaining brothers, and as I said, Admiral of the fleet. He is also politically what we call Whigs in England. The rebels here in America were also called Whigs, as the people in England were. The Whigs were often opponents of the king. In 1776, the King's Party are Tories. They're led by Prime Minister North, Lord North, and they really are the driving force for war against the colonies. They are the people who believe the colonies exist for the benefit of England, and that the rebelliousness of the colonies must be put down, and the colonies must relearn their proper place. The Whigs of England at this time are led by a gentleman named William Pitt, the 1st Earl of Chatham. So they call him Pitt, or they call him Chatham. Very popular here in America, as he led the opposition to things you might remember, like the Stamp Act, the Quartering Act, and the Tea Act. Pitt was also vocally against military occupation of the colonies and vocally against the colonies. The Howe brothers, both Admiral Richard and General William, are Whigs, and both had spoken out vocally in the Parliament against war with the colonies. Very interesting, isn't it, that they are military commanders? Now, we're just really going to go into Admiral Howe's views about the war. And I should also mention to you, I have here in my notes, and this is important, I shouldn't forget it, that the Howes are cousins to George III. This gives kind of an interesting social and familial connection to this story. Why is Admiral Richard Howe secretly conducting a diplomatic mission on behalf of his cousin, the king, without the knowledge of other diplomats, without the knowledge of the military commanders, and without the knowledge of the Parliament? Why is he on this mission on behalf of his cousin George? Very curious, isn't it? And for many years, this whole meeting was denied by everyone that it ever happened. And of course, the Americans said, of course it happened. But the English said, no, this never happened. We never sent Howe to do this. And later, Howe, admitted that, yes, he was here and this was his diplomatic mission. So they are cousins. And is it possible that King George trusts his cousin, Richard Howe, more than he trusts his own ministers at court. It's possible. Now, George at this time is 38 years old, so he's quite a bit younger than his cousin, Richard Howe. He's more in line with William Howe's age, but he obviously trusts him. Is the king himself having doubts about England's ability to beat the colonies? Now, let's look at the things that Lord Howe said in his speech in the House of Lords. He said, first of all, to go to war with the colonies was folly. Folly. He said it'll cost too much at a time when we in England are suffering from financial mishaps. You might know that England was in the midst of a financial disaster similar to the one that we went through in 2008, 2009, due to the British East India Company. You can read all about that separately, or if you want me to, let me know. I can do a whole Mrs. Q live on the East India Company if you'd like. It'd be very entertaining, I think. So Lord Howe says it's too expensive. Prime Minister North has just reduced the size of the Navy and the Army. It will require massive occupation of a land that's so large, we're not even sure how large it is. How can we possibly afford this? It will go on too long. It'll take too long to do, and we will lose the support of the wives and mothers of England, who will grow tired of this and feel that it's not being done in their interest and will no longer be interested in sacrificing their sons, brothers, and husbands for this cause. And he says it's too dangerous. He says they're all armed, they're all skilled in the use of their firearms, and they are determined to fight to the last person standing. Now, William Pitt echoed the same view when he said they built everything they have there and they will fight to the last person alive to defend it. We can never defeat them. Lord Howe says eventually this is going to be seen as a war that is benefiting the aristocracy of our nation and not the people, and the people will turn against us. And I encourage you to follow diplomacy and not the path of war with the colonies. You see some, Ms. Thompson would like me to talk about the East India Company. Okay, I will do one of those. That's a fascinating story, the East India Company and how they caused all of this. So why does the king make this a secret agreement? Maybe he thinks that the Whigs are right. Maybe he thinks the Whigs are right and that they can't beat the colonies, that this will be a war of attrition, that the colonies will just hold on and hold on and hold on, and that the British will be chasing them from the northernmost colonies of New England to the southernmost of Georgia out to the frontier. And eventually they'll run out of money and they'll run out of will and they'll run out of the support of the people. And I don't know, maybe it sounds like that's a little bit of what happened. So clearly the king is having some second thoughts about this war with the colonies. So he sends his cousin, secretly makes a deal with his cousin that if you can forge an armistice with the colonies, please try to do so. So this is what Admiral Howe is doing. Now, earlier in the summer, he made this attempt. He attempted to contact General Washington to ask Washington to speak to him. And Washington, of course, told Admiral Howe, I'm only a commander. You have to talk to the Congress. So Howe eventually got in touch with the Congress through an American general, General Sullivan, who was captured the Battle of Brooklyn. And the Congress decides to send these three men. Now, I realize I should have looked through the congressional records to see why they chose these three specific men, but I do think it was mainly geographic to make sure everyone felt they were adequately represented by one of the stronger representatives from East region. So as I said, let me try some of the screen sharing again here. So as I said, John Adams. So here we have John Adams representing New England and probably the most outspoken member of the Continental Congress. Benjamin Franklin, representing Pennsylvania and the mid-Atlantic colonies or states, and the oldest, and maybe they felt the more likely to be able to speak to the English, as he had represented Pennsylvania as the Pennsylvania agent, colonial agent to the Parliament for many years, and had spent time in London. So they likely felt that Franklin would be the most able to speak to Lord Howe. And Edward Rutledge we have here. from South Carolina, representing the Southern Coalition of Colonies. So this would be Edward Rutledge, as I mentioned, now the youngest signer of the Declaration of Independence, and quite a great intellectual and leader in his own right. And it is believed that that meeting took place in this room. So here's the room. And this is a very nice room. When you go to the conference house, you can walk all through and take the tour and visit this room. So it's thought that the meeting did take place in this room here. So the American delegation traveled first to New Jersey, where they stayed overnight, and the next morning they were escorted by the Royal Navy from New Jersey across here to the conference house. Now, John Adams talks about how frightened they all were and how worried that this might be a ruse, that they might be arrested by the British when they arrived on Staten Island, which was British territory. So you could imagine that these three men had quite a lot of concerns about their safety and their future now being in British territory. Now, eyewitness accounts say that there was an honor guard that lined that whole distance I showed you in the setup video from the water to the doorway of the house, a large British honor guard. So this would be all British soldiers lining the walkway, and that these three gentlemen walked among these soldiers. And it must have been a harrowing experience for them. I can't imagine. Maybe Franklin wasn't too worried, but I could guess that Adams and Rutledge were quite concerned about this, walking amidst all of these British soldiers. And they eventually met Lord Howe at the door of the house, and they went inside to speak. Now you can imagine maybe how this went, that it was not successful right from the start. The first thing that happens is Lord Howe, being a fine gentleman and aristocrat, asks these three gentlemen how they would like to be referred to, what honorific titles they would like used, as he is, you know, he says he can be either Admiral Howe or Lord Howe, and either way is acceptable to him. And he asks, how would each of you like to be addressed? And it's said that John Adams referred with something like, why, sir, you may address me in any manner you wish, other than that as a subject of the British Crown. And I believe this is likely true. It sounds very much like something John Adams would say. Showing full screen, but small on my desktop. I'm sorry, as long as you got to see the photos, you know, that is okay with me. Let me see if I can try this again. Maybe let me try opening this up first. Making it larger. I don't want to annoy you with my ability to not do this. And I'm going to try to share just this picture as I talk about the conference.
On my side? No, I don't.
Let me see if I can make this bigger for you. And maybe that's a little bit better. So hopefully that's a little bit better. So that was the room we were talking about, and I'm sorry, I accidentally closed the window. So as I mentioned, I'm not good at this screen sharing thing. Oh, that was good. Oh, let me find it again. Hopefully that is it, and you're seeing that large screen now. I see there's a green box around it. That means you're probably seeing it. So that is the room where this took place. So they arrive, and as I mentioned, Admiral Howe asks, how would you like me to address you? And John Adams responds, you may address me in any manner in which you please, other than that as a subject of the British Crown. So right off, we're off to a pretty difficult start. Thank you, everybody, for telling me I got the picture right. Okay, so this is the room where this meeting is taking place. So right away, we're off to, let's say, an uncomfortable start. Well, they speak a little bit more, they exchange some more niceties, and of course, Admiral Howe tells them that what he needs them to do before the conversation can continue is to agree to rescind the Declaration of Independence. And of course, you know that is not going to happen. So that's the end of our peace conference. So we have all of this lead up to it, all of these formalities where they take their barge across the water and they're greeted by all of these British soldiers and they're escorted up to Lord Howe. And the conference is only maybe an hour long, and Lord Howe departs. So that is the story of our peace conference. It did not work out at all. Why would Lord Howe think that these three men would be willing to rescind the Declaration of Independence? That could just be a disconnect. You know, think about it. He is a Lord of England, and they don't have the same type of representative government as our Continental Congress. And he might have really believed that these three gentlemen right then and there had the authority to make such a decision. He may not have understood that they were only vested by the people to do the will of the people. And of course, they could not do that even if they wanted to. So that just might be a misunderstanding on the part of a powerful aristocrat and three gentlemen who are really serving the needs of the people they know that they represent. So the beginnings of a difference of way of governing from government by a king and lords to a government of the people and the people's representatives. So Lord Howe left, and he told them that they were free to stay for the evening, that they would be safe, they would be under British protection for the night, and they could leave the next day safely and return to the Congress. And Lord Howe kept his word, and the gentlemen did stay the night and depart the next day for Philadelphia. So Lord Howe, as a gentleman, did keep his word. There are all kinds of great stories about the night that the three men spent here, particularly, of course, the eternal stories about Benjamin Franklin and John Adams sharing a room and arguing all night whether the window should be open or the window should be closed, among other things. So we have lots of good Adams versus Franklin stories about that night. Now, the interesting thing about this meeting also is the day it takes place, September 11th, and where it lies in the timeline of the Battle of New York. So you might recall the battle started on August 22nd. On August 29th, George Washington successfully escaped a British trap in Brooklyn by crossing the East River into New York. And now by September 10th, the war seems to be stalled in New York. Howe has not pursued General Washington into New York. People on both sides are puzzled about why Howe has not done that. Washington and his generals are wondering what's going on with Howe. Loyalists in New York are wondering what's going on with Howe. Some of them even assuming that Howe is just simply incompetent and for some reason is letting these farmers get away time and time again. But now we know, looking back, that the Howe brothers are waiting for this attempt at this peace conference, that General Howe is giving his brother an opportunity to have this meeting in the hopes that it will come to something good and there will not be needless bloodshed. Let's take a look for a minute before we end at what General Howe, the younger Howe brother, said in his speech in the House of Lords, or I should say it was a combined meeting of House of Lords and Commons and Parliament. He said, first of all, that he took no pleasure shooting the very people who had honored his brother. When his older brother, Colonel George Howe, was killed around Albany, the people there took up a collection for a monument to be made on behalf of his brother. So he says, I take no pleasure in this. These people have honored my family, and you ask me now to go shoot upon them. And this is not an honorable thing for me to do. He also echoes his brother in saying that it can't work. You know, it can't work. It won't work out the way you think. And we really ought to pursue a legal agreement with the colonies over their differences. He also says this is embarrassing to England under Magna Carta and under our great system of the English Constitution to force the people of England who don't agree with us to agree with us at the end of muskets, at the end of weapons. So you can see General Howe himself is also not happy about this. So it would make sense that General Howe would be willing to stall in his effort to not have more bloodshed than necessary here in America, to stop it early if possible. And of course, his brother has the meeting. The meeting doesn't work, and you may know that the next assault will be September 15th, 1776, the Battle of Kipps Bay, when General Howe does land finally on the island of Manhattan with an enormous assault from Brooklyn, Queens. And I will be doing a video about the Battle of Kipps Bay as well. So I'm just going to close here. I'm going to find a couple more pictures from the conference house now that I figured out how to show them to you properly. Enlarge this over here, and this is one of the bedrooms in the conference house. This is one of the upstairs bedrooms in the conference house. Very nice. You can see the matching linens on the bed and on the window. And this would be a very nice master bedroom at that time. Also very nice craftsmanship in the furniture in this room. So this is what we would think of as a wealthy home at that time. And one more that I would like you to see, hold on a moment. And I think some of you have seen this one a lot. Hold on, grab it. And this one you've seen quite often. I often use this as a background for my Live with Mrs. Q. This is the downstairs kitchen in the home. And this is also one of the ways we know this was a wealthy home and that the kitchen was in the bottom of the home and not upstairs on the main floor. So all the cooking was done in the basement in this massive fireplace. And if you look off to the right in this fireplace, you can see the little oven in there with the tea kettle being kept warm. And one of the things you can't see is, I think on the left, on the inside, there's a little door which would be used as an oven for baking bread. So this would be a large use fireplace at the time. You can see the pots in there. And if you look on the floor, you can see some blue tiles there and also some red tiles. Those are also Holland brick, those colored brick from Holland that are very, very expensive, that we see throughout the Phillips house. And you can see the stone basement. So you see where below street level or below land level. And off to our right behind us is a storage cellar that they used to put up food in the winter. So in the summer, this would keep food cool. And of course, in the winter, it would keep it stored in the darkness throughout the winter as there was no, refrigeration. So they would store their food. And that is a very large storage cellar off there to the right. I thought I had a picture of it, but I didn't. So I apologize for that. When I can get back out there, I'll go out there and do a live stream from there. If you would like to see a current live stream, you can go over to Urbanist. My friend Ariel Vieira last week did a live video of the Phillips house where he took the whole tour and has it on video. So you can also go over and watch Ariel's video. Okay. So thank you all so much. I'm just checking your comments to see if there's any questions I have to answer. Mr. Linden, Colonel Phillips was in residence at that time, but he likely was deployed by the British by the time the conference took place here. But yes, his family did still live here. And by the way, that brings up an interesting question. What happened to the Phillips at the end of the war? They went to Canada. Of course, they were expelled because he served in the British military during the war. So the Phillips family was expelled at the end of the war. I don't know who owned the house after that. It was a succession of other families. I think I remember reading that many of the families who lived there didn't recognize the historic significance of the house until later. The Preservation Commission preserved the house and declared it to be a landmark. Conference House Staten Island does have a website where you can learn more, as does the New York City Park Service has a page about this too. And I think I have all of your questions. So thank you all for joining me from, let's see, from Virginia, from North Carolina, from all around the country. It's always wonderful to see you. I hope you learned something interesting today. Oh, and for those of you who are watching, who are planning to be at Setauket next Saturday, my next live stream will be next Saturday afternoon at noon from Setauket, where I will be visiting as Mrs. Q and learning all about the Culper Spy Ring. I hope some of you will be joining me there either live or it will be live streamed here as well. So until next Saturday at noon, have a wonderful week. Keep studying the American Revolution. You'll never learn it all. There's always something interesting to learn. And I will see you all again soon. Oh, let me see. Oh, thank you. Thank you, Mrs. McCabe. It's good to see you and Mr. McCabe watching. And I hope you'll be watching me on Saturday in Setauket. I'm still trying to figure out what to wear. What would Mrs. Q wear to Setauket on a September afternoon? Mrs. Q needs a fall outfit for next Saturday. So I will see you all next week. Thank you so much for joining me. Have an excellent week, everyone.